Hi, my name's Adeline. The night my husband and his family dragged me out into a blizzard, I was still healing from the accident that left me in a wheelchair. He looked me in the eye and said, "You're just dead weight now." And when my little girl dropped to her knees begging them not to do this, they shoved her down and called us filthy rats. But here's what they didn't know. I had just inherited $101 million. What came next made them fall to their knees, screaming. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this, and where from? Drop a comment below. I want to know, because this story, it could happen to anyone. The wind outside screamed against the windows, rattling the old wooden frames of our house. Snow swirled so thick I could barely see past the porch. It was the kind of storm that made the whole world feel like it was closing in, and inside, I felt the same. I shifted in my wheelchair, the ache in my legs reminding me of the accident that had left me like this. Just weeks ago, I'd been walking, driving Marcy to her piano lesson, planning our Christmas dinner. Now I couldn't even get to the kitchen without someone's help. I told myself Darian, my husband, would stand by me. That's what we promised each other, through sickness and health, right? But the way he looked at me tonight, I knew something had changed. His eyes didn't hold warmth anymore. They were cold, calculating, like I was no longer his wife, but a burden he was forced to drag around. Marcy was coloring at the coffee table, humming softly to herself, trying to pretend everything was normal. She was only 10, yet she noticed everything. She looked up when Darian came into the living room, his mother Irene trailing right behind him like a shadow. Irene's coat was still dusted with snow, her lips pressed tight as if the very air in the house offended her. "Adeline," Darian said, his voice sharp enough to cut. "We need to talk." I felt my chest tighten. "About what?" "About this." He waved his hand at me, at the chair, at my legs, at all of me. "I can't do this anymore. You're just dead weight." The words hit harder than the crash that broke my spine. For a moment, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one inside me. My ears rang. My breath caught. Marcy froze, her crayon slipping from her fingers. "Dad, don't say that!" She scrambled to my side, her little hand clutching mine so tight it hurt. "She's still Mom. She's everything." Darian didn't flinch. Irene's face twisted into something between pity and disgust. "Marcy," she said flatly, "you need to learn the truth. Your mother is useless now. She can't even take care of herself." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "I may be in this chair, but I am not useless. I'm still the same woman who—" "Save it!" Darian snapped. "You can't feed us anymore. You can't provide. We can't keep dragging you along." Marcy dropped to her knees on the rug, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Please, Dad, don't do this. Please, Grandma, please. Don't send us away." For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, his heart would crack. But then Irene moved forward, her hand shoving Marcy so hard she tumbled onto the floor. "Get up, you filthy rats," she spat. "Out, now!" The world blurred. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, what I was seeing. "You can't mean this," I whispered, my voice trembling. But Darian was already yanking the door open. The wind roared in, whipping snow across the floor. Without a second thought, he grabbed the back of my wheelchair and pushed. The wheels caught against the threshold, jolting me forward. I clutched Marcy's arm as she scrambled up, her small body braced against the cold. "Dad!" she screamed. "Stop!" He didn't stop. He shoved harder, and suddenly we were outside, the blizzard slamming into us like a wall. The door shut behind us with a hollow, final thud. Snowflakes stung my face, icy needles cutting against my skin. Marcy pressed against me, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. My heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the realization they had truly thrown us away. I pulled her close, my arms wrapping tight around her trembling frame. "We'll be okay," I whispered into her hair, though every part of me doubted it. The storm swallowed my words, but I forced them out anyway, because she needed to hear them, even if I didn't believe them yet. The morning after the storm felt like waking up in a different world. The blizzard had finally quieted, leaving everything covered in a thick blanket of snow. The silence was almost too much, broken only by Marcy's soft breathing beside me. We had spent the night curled together in a blanket on a borrowed cot, thanks to Mr. Harris, the neighbor who'd taken us in when he saw us struggling in the snow. My body ached from the cold and from the awkward angle I'd slept in. I glanced down at Marcy, her little face still pressed against my arm. Her hair stuck to her cheek, damp from the tears she'd cried until she finally drifted off. I stroked her hair gently, swallowing back the bitterness that still lingered in my chest. A knock at the door startled me. I stiffened, fearing for a second it was Darian or Irene come to drag us back only to humiliate us again. But when Mr. Harris poked his head in, relief washed over me. "Morning, Odalyn," he said, his voice steady but kind. "The mail came late yesterday before the storm got too bad. I thought you might want this." He held out a thick envelope. My name was written neatly across the front. I frowned. Who would be sending me mail? He gave a small shrug. "Looks official. Law firm up in the city." I hesitated before taking it, my fingers trembling as I broke the seal. The weight of the envelope told me it wasn't just another bill. Inside was a letter printed on heavy paper, the kind that smelled faintly of ink and formality. My eyes darted across the first line, and my breath caught. "Mom?" Marcy whispered, sitting up, sensing my change in expression. I tried to steady my voice. It's from a law office. They're asking me to come in." "Something about a will?" Her small eyes widened. "A will? Like money?" I shook my head quickly, not wanting to fill her with false hope. "It might be a mistake." "Probably is." But deep inside, a tiny flicker of curiosity, and something else, something I hadn't felt in weeks, stirred. Later that morning, Mr. Harris insisted on driving us into the city. The roads were still slick with ice, but he said it wasn't safe for me and Marcy to travel alone. The whole way, I kept staring at that letter, wondering if it was some cruel prank, or maybe one more way life planned to remind me how invisible I'd become. When we finally arrived, the office was quiet and warm, smelling faintly of leather and coffee. An older man in a gray suit stood as we entered. He had a calmness about him, the kind of presence that made you listen before he even spoke. "Mrs. Crowell?" he asked. "Yes." My voice cracked. "I'm Mr. Turner," he said, extending his hand. "Please, have a seat. We have important matters to discuss." I wheeled closer to his desk, Marcy clutching my coat sleeve tightly. Mr. Turner opened a folder and slid a document toward me. His voice was steady, almost gentle. "Your late Uncle Arthur named you the sole beneficiary of his estate. The total value exceeds $100 million. For a moment, the words didn't make sense. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. $100 million? "Yes," he confirmed. "But there's a condition. You must not reveal this inheritance to anyone, not even your closest family, for 6 months. If you fail to keep it confidential, the entire estate will be transferred elsewhere." I felt my stomach drop. The memory of Darian's face, cold, cruel, telling me I was nothing, flashed through my mind. If he ever found out. Marcy leaned closer, whispering, "Mom, is it real?" I could barely find my voice. "It's real," Mr. Turner continued. "The funds will remain secured until the period is complete. In the meantime, we will provide for your living arrangements discreetly. Do you understand the importance of secrecy, Mrs. Crowell?" I nodded slowly, my pulse pounding in my ears. I do. As we left the office, a sleek black car waited to take us back. Marcy looked at me with cautious hope in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, I let myself squeeze her hand and whisper, "Maybe we'll be okay after all." But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The apartment felt colder than usual that evening, even though the heat clanked through the old pipes. Maybe it wasn't the temperature at all. Maybe it was the silence. A week had passed since that day in Mr. Turner's office, and I was still replaying every word of it in my mind. The secret I carried now weighed more than the chair beneath me. I tried to keep things normal. Marcy and I had settled into a quiet rhythm, me rolling between the stove and the small table where she did her homework. I had started selling baked goods online, just enough to cover what little we needed without raising eyebrows. Cookies, pies, bread, things that smelled like comfort even when nothing felt stable. Darian, oddly enough, had been attentive. He came home earlier. He asked if I needed anything. He'd even kissed Marcy's forehead one night. On the surface, it should have been comforting. But deep down, I knew better. The man who'd thrown us into a snowstorm didn't change overnight. This was something else. Something calculated. It was late, long after Marcy had fallen asleep, when I heard voices outside in the hallway. At first I thought it was the neighbors, but the low rumble of Darian's voice made my chest tighten. I pushed myself quietly toward the door, careful not to wake Marcy. "She's not the woman I married," Darian said. His voice was low but sharp, cutting through the stillness. "I can't do this anymore. She's just different." My breath caught. He wasn't alone. A soft laugh followed, one I recognized too well. Rachel. Rachel Myers had been my friend since college, the one who came by with wine after Marcy was born, the one I once trusted with my secrets. Hearing her voice now felt like a knife twisting. "You deserve better," Rachel said softly. "You've carried this long enough." I leaned closer, my hand gripping the wheel of my chair. "Sometimes I wonder how she's managing," Darian went on. "She's got nothing. Yet suddenly things seem easier. Doesn't add up." Rachel's reply came almost in a whisper, laced with curiosity. "You think she's hiding something?" My chest burned. They were circling me like vultures. I pulled back before I made a sound, my heart thudding so loudly I was sure they'd hear. I wheeled myself back to the bedroom, sat in the dark, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The next morning, a knock on the door pulled me from a restless sleep. Marcy was still dozing, so I opened it myself. There she was, Rachel. Her smile was too sweet, her eyes scanning the apartment like she was cataloging every detail. "I thought I'd bring coffee," she said, stepping in before I could answer. "You must be exhausted." I forced a smile. "That's kind of you." She set the cups down on the counter, her gaze lingering on the pile of neatly stacked receipts from my little baking business. "Looks like you've been keeping busy," she said casually. "I do what I can." She took a sip of her coffee, watching me over the rim. "It's just impressive. After everything, you seem stable, almost like you've got some kind of help." Her tone was light, but the weight behind her words was heavy. I knew what she was doing, probing, testing. "I manage," I replied evenly. "Marcy helps too." Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course she does." When she finally left, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I wheeled straight to the bedroom and slid the envelope from under my pillow, fingers trembling as I checked it again, even though I knew the words by heart now. I couldn't risk anyone finding it, not Darian, not Rachel. That night, as Marcy slept peacefully beside me, I stared into the darkness and whispered to myself, "They think I'm weak. They'll find out how wrong they are." The next morning started off ordinary enough. Marcy sat at the kitchen table coloring while I prepared a simple breakfast, oatmeal and toast, the kind of meal that filled the room with warmth, even if the air outside still bit through the windows. The snow from last week's storm lay heavy on the roofs and sidewalks, untouched and shining beneath the pale sun. I tried to focus on the rhythm of stirring the oatmeal, the scrape of the spoon against the pot, anything to keep my mind from circling back to what I'd overheard, but the unease hung over me like a shadow. Then I saw it. As Darian strolled into the kitchen, still rubbing the sleep from his eyes, my gaze caught on his wrist. A sleek, unfamiliar watch glinted in the morning light. I knew every item he owned. I had bought most of them myself back when things were different. But this wasn't from me. "Daddy, that's new," Marcy piped up innocently, pointing with her crayon. "Where'd you get it?" Darian smirked, glancing at me as though he wanted me to see the gleam of it. "A gift," he said casually, pouring himself coffee. Something inside me snapped tight. I pushed my chair back from the stove and looked him straight in the eye. "Is it from her?" He didn't flinch, didn't bother with a lie. Instead, he shrugged, the smirk never leaving his face. "Maybe it is. What are you going to do about it, Odalyn?" Marcy froze, her crayon slipping from her fingers. I felt her eyes on me, waiting for me to crumble like I usually did, waiting for me to swallow the words and keep the peace. But I didn't. I kept my voice calm, even, though my heart hammered in my chest. "You don't even try to hide it anymore." Darian leaned against the counter, swirling his coffee slowly, savoring his little performance. Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice until it was a blade against my ear. "You think you can survive without me?" "You're nothing without this roof over your head. Sign over what little you have left, or I'll make sure you and that kid of yours are out on the streets." The blood drained from my face, but I refused to let him see fear. I knew exactly what he was aiming for. My silence, my compliance. "Threatening your own wife in front of your daughter," I said softly. "That's who you are now?" His eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. "Don't push me, Odalyn. You'll regret it." I met his stare without blinking. "If you throw me out again, Darian, you'll regret it more than you can imagine." For a moment, his smirk faltered. Then he chuckled under his breath, dismissing me like a child who didn't know her place. "You've got nothing, Odalyn. Nothing." He walked out of the kitchen, the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall. Marcy hurried to my side, clutching my arm with small, trembling fingers. "Mom," she whispered, eyes wide with worry. I forced a smile for her, smoothing her hair back from her face. "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got us." But as I wheeled back into the bedroom later, the door shut tight behind me. My hands shook as I slid the envelope back under my pillow. My pulse wouldn't slow. I pressed a hand over it, whispering into the quiet. "They think they've broken me. They have no idea what's coming." That night, lying awake in the dim glow of the streetlight seeping through the blinds, I tried to steady my breathing. My mind wouldn't stop replaying his words, the glint of that watch, the cruel satisfaction in his voice. And then, just as my eyes started to close, my phone lit up on the nightstand. A message. One that would change everything. Paralyzed. The light from my phone glowed against the dark, the message staring back at me. "Don't trust him. Leave quietly. Right now." My chest tightened, and I sat up straighter in bed, the old mattress creaking under my weight. Marcy slept soundly beside me, her little hand curled against my arm, the soft rise and fall of her breathing a steady rhythm in the silence. For a moment, I thought about deleting the message, pretend it was a mistake, pretend life could go back to what it was, but deep down, I knew too well, there are no coincidences like this. I read it again, fingers trembling. No name, no number I recognized, just a warning. I stared at the door, half expecting Darian to barge in, though I knew he was sleeping in the other room. My thoughts raced. Who would send me this? How did they know? And why now, after everything I'd already endured? By morning, I'd made up my mind. If someone risked sending me a message like that, I couldn't ignore it. I needed answers. To keep things calm, I told Marcy we were going out for a special breakfast, something we hadn't done in months. She brightened instantly, pulling on her boots and her pink scarf with the little hearts stitched along the edge. I smiled at her enthusiasm, even as my stomach churned. The streets of our Minnesota town were still blanketed in snow, though the plows had carved narrow lanes through the white. I pushed my wheelchair carefully down the shoveled sidewalk while Marcy skipped ahead, humming softly, her breath clouding in the cold air. My neighbor, Mrs. Harris, waved from her porch, her expression warm but curious. I waved back, forcing a smile. The cafe we chose sat tucked at the corner of Main Street, its big windows fogged from the warmth inside. The smell of coffee and fresh pastries hit me the moment we stepped in, wrapping around me like a hug I hadn't realized I needed. We found a small table near the back. Marcy busied herself with a blueberry muffin, while I kept glancing at the door, heart pounding with every bell chime as someone entered. Then I saw him. Michael Lane. I blinked twice, making sure it was really him. He looked older, of course, gray streaking his once dark hair, fine lines around his eyes. But it was Michael, my childhood friend, the boy who used to race me down the hill behind my grandmother's house. He approached slowly, like he wasn't sure if I'd welcome him. "Adeline," he said softly, pulling out the chair across from me. I couldn't hide the surprise in my voice. "Michael? It's been years." "Too many," he said, then glanced at Marcy. "She looks just like you did when we were kids." Marcy smiled shyly, then turned her attention back to her muffin. Michael leaned in, lowering his voice. "I was the one who sent the message." I froze, my breath catching. "Why?" "Because you're in danger," he said plainly. "Adeline, I work at the courthouse now. A few days ago, I saw Darian and Rachel, I think her name is, in the records office. They were trying to file papers under your name. Forged signatures. If those documents had gone through, they'd have had control of your accounts." My stomach dropped. "You're sure?" I watched it with my own eyes. They didn't see me, but I couldn't just stand by. I knew I had to warn you. The room seemed to close in around me, the hum of voices fading into a distant buzz. I thought of Darian's threats, the watch on his wrist, Rachel's fake smile, the way she probed me with questions just days ago. It all connected now. Michael reached across the table, his hand covering mine. His touch was steady, grounding me. "If you don't act now, he'll strip you of everything. Don't let them." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't the time for weakness. I thought about Marcy, about the fear in her eyes when Darian shoved us into that blizzard, about the inheritance I was sworn to keep secret. For the first time in months, I felt something stronger than fear. Resolve. I squeezed Michael's hand, my voice steady. "Then it's time I stop being their victim." He nodded, his expression firm. "Good. You've got more strength than you think." As we left the cafe, the cold morning air felt different, brisk, alive, like a call to arms. I pushed forward, Marcy skipping happily beside me, unaware of the storm still brewing just out of sight. That night, long after Marcy had drifted off, I sat alone in the quiet of our apartment. My phone glowed again in the darkness, the memory of Michael's words circling in my mind. And I made a choice, one that would change the course of everything. That night, after Michael left me with the warning still echoing in my ears, I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling of my bedroom. Marcy's soft breathing was the only thing steady in my world, and it was enough to keep me from spiraling. I whispered again to myself, "Not this time." 2 mornings later, I bundled myself up, wrapping a thick scarf around my neck and pulling a knit hat low over my forehead. Michael had agreed to meet me at the courthouse to show me the files. I told Marcy we were going to stop by the library afterward, so she wouldn't suspect anything. She slipped her hand into mine, her cheeks rosy from the cold, as we walked the short distance together. The courthouse loomed ahead, tall and gray against the winter sky. My stomach tightened. The last time I'd been inside, it was to finalize the adoption paperwork when Marcy was born. Back then, Darian held my hand like a partner who meant forever. That memory now felt like a cruel joke. Michael met us by the entrance, his face serious. "Stay close," he murmured. "I don't want anyone noticing you're here." He led us down a quiet corridor, his badge granting us access past a desk clerk too busy sipping coffee to care. The records office smelled of paper and dust. Michael pulled a thin folder from a stack he'd tucked aside, handing it to me carefully. I opened it, and there it was. My name scrawled across documents I'd never signed. My breath caught in my throat. The signature was neat, practiced. An imitation so convincing it made me shiver. "They're trying to transfer ownership of your accounts," Michael whispered. "If this had gone through, you'd have nothing." I gripped the folder, my hands trembling. How close did it get?" "Close enough," he said quietly. "But I stalled it. You need to protect yourself, Odalyn." Marcy tugged my sleeve, her big eyes full of questions. I forced a smile and stroked her hair. "Just some boring grown-up stuff, honey." She nodded, though I could tell she sensed the weight of it all. By the time we returned home, my mind was racing. I tucked the folder deep under Marcy's schoolbooks, knowing Darian would never think to look there. I had no plan yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let him win. That evening, I heard the front door slam. Darian's heavy footsteps filled the apartment, and Rachel trailed close behind, her perfume sharp and cloying. Marcy froze by the kitchen table, clutching her pencil as if homework could shield her from what was coming. Darian's lips curved into a smirk. On his wrist gleamed the same watch I'd noticed days ago. He tapped it lightly. "Like it? Rachel has good taste." My stomach twisted. "So it's true," I said evenly, my voice calm, though my pulse raced. "You're not even pretending anymore." He leaned against the counter, his eyes cold. "Pretending? I'm done with pretending." "You're not the woman I married. You're nothing but a burden now." Rachel's voice slipped in like poison. "Odalyn, don't make this ugly. Think of Marcy. She doesn't need to see her mother struggle more than she already does." My hands gripped the wheels of my chair, steadying myself. "And what exactly are you here for?" Darian pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket, tossing it onto the table. "A new agreement. For your medical care. Sign it, and you'll stay taken care of. Refuse." He leaned down, close enough for me to feel the chill of his breath. "And I'll make sure you and that kid of yours have nothing." Marcy's voice trembled. "Mom?" I locked eyes with Darian, refusing to flinch. "If you throw me out, Darian, you'll regret it more than you can imagine." For the first time, I saw a flicker of hesitation cross his face. Rachel quickly covered it with a sharp laugh. "Tick-tock, Odalyn." "We always win." They left with the slam of the door echoing through the apartment. Marcy ran into my arms, tears spilling down her cheeks. I held her close, whispering steady words, though my own heart thundered. When the apartment finally quieted, I rolled into my bedroom, shut the door, and let the silence wrap around me. I touched the folder hidden under Marcy's books and whispered. The pounding started before the sun had fully risen. I jolted awake, my heart already racing, and Marcy stirred beside me. The echo of fists on wood felt like thunder in our small apartment. I wheeled myself to the door, pulling Marcy close. When I opened it, there stood Mr. Harris, the landlord. His shoulders sagged as if the paper in his hands weighed more than he could bear. "I'm sorry, Odalyn," he whispered, slipping the envelope into my hand. His eyes darted nervously down the hall. They pulled strings. I had no choice. Marcy leaned around me, her voice trembling. "What is it, Mom?" I didn't want to answer. My hands shook as I tore the envelope open. My stomach dropped. An eviction notice. Effective immediately. Snow lashed the windows behind him, and the bitter wind that crept in through the doorway bit into my skin. Mr. Harris avoided my gaze. "You've got until noon," he said softly. I'm sorry." Then he turned and left, his boots crunching against the icy hallway floor. I closed the door with a shaky hand, clutching the paper like it might dissolve if I held it too tightly. Marcy's small face searched mine for reassurance I didn't have. Are we leaving?" she asked, her voice breaking. I forced a calm tone, though panic clawed at my chest. "We'll pack what we can, sweetheart. It'll be okay." We scrambled. I shoved what little we could into bags. Warm clothes, a few family pictures, Marcy's school books. My chair slowed me down, every movement heavy, but Marcy worked alongside me, her tears freezing on her cheeks as she carried stacks of things to the door. The sound of engines outside made me freeze. I looked through the frosted window. A moving truck sat in the parking lot, men in heavy coats already unloading empty bins. My stomach clenched when I saw Darian's black SUV parked behind it. Moments later, the door burst open. Darian strode in, Rachel close behind him, her lips curved in a smirk sharp enough to cut glass. Darian didn't bother knocking. He glanced at the packed bags, then at me. "Moving out already?" he drawled. "Good, saves us some time." On his wrist glimmered that same watch, Rachel's gift. He tugged at his sleeve just to show it off, like he wanted the knife to twist deeper. Marcy stepped forward, clutching her doll. "Daddy, please, don't do this." He barely looked at her. "You'll understand someday, kid. Your mother's dead weight now." The words stung more than the icy draft. I tightened my grip on my chair to steady myself. "You've already taken everything from me," I said, my voice low. "What more do you want?" Rachel leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. "Everything. That's the point." The movers began pulling our belongings out, dropping them carelessly into the snow outside. One of the bags burst open, Marcy's school books scattering across the icy steps. She gasped and scrambled to pick them up, her little hands trembling. I wheeled forward, my heart pounding. "Stop! Those are her things!" Darian just smirked. "They won't matter where you're going." Marcy fell to her knees, clutching her books to her chest. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Please don't make us leave," Rachel sneered, stepping closer and shoving Marcy back so hard she landed in the snow. "Get out, you filthy rats," she hissed. The neighbors' curtains twitched. Faces appeared in windows, watching but not intervening. Their silence was deafening. My body shook, not just from the cold but from the fury burning in my veins. I wheeled over, pulling Marcy into my lap, shielding her with my arms. Her small body pressed against me, her tears soaking into my coat. I whispered into her hair, steadying both of us. "We'll survive this. They won't win." Darian leaned in, his eyes cold as steel. "We always win, Odalyn. Always." I met his gaze, refusing to flinch. "Not this time," I said, my voice calm, steady, even as my heart thundered. The movers finished, slamming the door behind them. We were left in the brutal cold, our things scattered across the snow like scraps. I looked out at the swirling storm, holding Marcy close, and whispered, "They think this is the end, but it's only the beginning." That same night, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the evidence that could end them. My fingers brushed over the cold edges of the documents I'd hidden under a stack of Marcy's schoolwork. The storm outside rattled the windows, but the papers in my hands felt heavier than the howling wind itself. 2 days later, I found myself rolling through the lobby of Mr. Turner's law office. Marcy walked quietly beside me, her little mittened hand clutching the armrest of my wheelchair. She'd stopped asking why we were doing all this. Her wide, watchful eyes said she understood more than I wanted her to. Mr. Turner greeted us with the calm authority only an old hand at the law could manage. His office smelled faintly of leather and coffee, his shelves lined with thick volumes that looked like they hadn't moved in years. He gestured for me to set the documents on his desk. I laid them down carefully. These were slipped under my door a few days ago. They want me to sign something I didn't. Look at the signature. He adjusted his glasses and studied the papers. After a moment, he looked up at me with a grim set to his jaw. This isn't just sloppy, Odalyn. This is criminal. They've forged your name on documents that would give them control of your finances. The words sank into me like ice, but instead of fear, I felt a surge of resolve. Marcy leaned forward timidly. Does that mean they can't take our home, Mr. Turner? He smiled softly at her, then turned back to me. You have more power here than you realize. We'll file an injunction first thing in the morning. By the time Darian tries to move again, the law will already be standing in his way. For the first time in weeks, I saw hope flicker in Marcy's eyes. 2 mornings later, I wheeled into the courthouse lobby with Mr. Turner at my side. Michael Lane stood quietly a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, scanning the room like he wanted to make sure no one got too close. Marcy sat on a bench nearby, clutching her doll, her legs swinging nervously. Darian and Rachel were already there. Rachel looked me up and down with a smirk, as if she'd won something just by being present. Darian crossed his arms, his voice dripping with disdain. You think anyone's going to believe you, Odalyn? Look at you. You're desperate, pathetic. Everyone here knows it. Rachel leaned close to him, just loud enough for others to hear. She's delusional. Nothing but dead weight. My cheeks burned, but I forced myself to stay calm. Slowly, I pulled the documents from my bag and laid them flat on the table between us. Funny, isn't it? I said, my voice steady. My signature looks perfect, considering I never signed these. The murmur in the lobby was instant. I could feel eyes on us from every corner. Darian's smug expression faltered, his lips tightening as his eyes flicked over the papers. Rachel's face drained of color, her fingers twitching nervously at her side. Mr. Turner leaned forward, his voice firm. These are clear forgeries. We've already filed charges of fraud and forgery. The court will handle the rest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Darian's face turned ashen, his bravado crumbling. Rachel's whisper barely carried, but I heard it. This can't be happening. I leaned in, meeting Darian's eyes. You should have left me with nothing, Darian. Because now, I have everything. His jaw tightened, but for the first time he had no retort. The bailiff called out names in the background, but in that moment, it felt like the entire courthouse had gone still. I could see the shock in his face, the realization that his game was over. As the lobby buzzed with murmurs and stares, I wheeled back toward Marcy, who ran up and hugged me tightly. I pressed a kiss to her hair, whispering, "We're going to be okay." Yet that night, as the snow fell outside, I finally opened the sealed envelope from my uncle's estate. The paper felt delicate between my fingers, like it had been waiting for me all this time. I unfolded the letter slowly, reading words that blurred as my eyes filled with tears. You were always stronger than they knew, it began. This gift is not just for you, but for those you'll help. Use it to build the life you deserve, and never forget, you are more than what anyone else says you are. I pressed the letter to my chest, my breath trembling. For the first time in so long, I didn't feel broken. I felt chosen. 6 months later, the harsh Minnesota winter had finally lifted. The sun cut through the clouds, warming the sidewalks outside my newly renovated bakery. The scent of fresh bread and cinnamon rolls spilled into the street as neighbors gathered, smiling and clapping. A big red ribbon stretched across the bakery doors, ready to be cut. Marcy stood beside me, her face glowing with excitement. She held the giant pair of scissors with both hands, while I steadied them from my chair. Michael Lane stood just behind us, his quiet presence steady as ever. Mr. Turner, dignified as always, offered a small nod of encouragement. When the ribbon fell, cheers erupted. Marcy squealed and threw her arms around me. I laughed, a real laugh that came from deep inside. This wasn't just a bakery. It was also a small community foundation, a place where struggling families could find warmth, food, and dignity. It was everything I'd wished for back when I felt like no one saw me. Later that afternoon, when the crowd thinned and the ovens hummed in the back, I slipped into my office and read the letter again. My uncle's words wrapped around me like a blanket. You were always stronger than they knew. I whispered softly, "Thank you," as a tear rolled down my cheek, not from sorrow, but from gratitude. Just as I tucked the letter back into its drawer, the bell above the bakery door jingled. I turned to see Darian and Rachel standing there. They looked nothing like the polished, smug pair I once knew. Darian's suit hung loose on him, his face drawn and pale. Rachel's hair was unkempt, her eyes darting around the room as though afraid someone might throw them out before they could speak. "We've lost everything," Rachel said, her voice cracking. "Please, just a little help." Darian's jaw tightened, his bitterness cutting through his desperation. "You owe us, Audalyn. Without me, you'd be nothing." The bakery fell silent. Even the children at the back table stopped whispering. I wheeled forward slowly, every eye in the room watching. My voice was calm, steady. "You left me when I had nothing. You called me dead weight, and now I have more than you could ever imagine." I paused, my gaze unwavering. "But you'll get none of it." Rachel's lip trembled. Darian's face flushed, his fists clenching at his sides. Security, already alerted by Michael, stepped forward. Without another word, they escorted the two of them out. The sound of the door shutting behind them was louder than any slam I'd ever heard. Marcy rushed into my arms, her little body trembling. "You did it, Mom. You really did." I kissed the top of her head. "No, sweetheart. We did." The bakery slowly filled with laughter again, the smell of bread mingling with the hum of voices. Michael came over, slipping a hand gently on my shoulder. "This is just the beginning, Audalyn." I nodded, my eyes sweeping the room, the families, the children, the faces filled with hope. My scars would always be with me, but for the first time, I wasn't ashamed of them. They were proof that I had survived, and now I was living. As I looked around at the faces filled with hope, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was truly living.